quorum today, but that is okay because we are on informational. Here is our quorum. We do in fact now have a quorum. Welcome, Ms. Stiles. But we do not have, I think, any voting matters on our agenda, mostly everything informational here. So with that, welcome and thank you. This is our 4th executive committee meeting within about 6 months into our term here. So we're not quite on a monthly cadence, we're on about 6 weeks. Thank you all again for being here. I'm going to jump ahead on our agenda because Ms. Zeitlin is kindly here to update us on Council Connect, but has a commitment right after this. So we're going to move that Council Connect update to the top of the agenda. And Ms. Zeitlin, you are recognized.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm Hannah Zeitlin. I'm going to talk to you about Council Connect. So since the last executive committee meeting, there's been active discussion on Council Connect. There's 3 topics that are active: stormwater policy, missing middle housing, and board and commission appointments. I know that Councilmember Evans has been active on Council Connect. So if you would all, like to just join in the conversations and, go and see what's on there. And if you have a topic that you want to be discussed, just email me. You can email councilconnectsupport@nashville.gov. So Council Connect, the site, if you're looking for it, it can be found under the Quick Links tab on the Council homepage on nashville.gov. And then under the navigation bar to the left, there is a Council Connect tab. It'll take you directly there if you click Council Connect.
That is new, and thank you, at my request, because I think there's a little bit of an impediment, like how do I get there,
Right.
And for lack of, I think Ms. Benedict said, is there an app for that,
Right.
But would encourage members to, open on your phone, create a tab or a short
Yes.
link, but if needed, council resources, landing page, that it's there as well now.
Yeah, and I think that the site itself is pretty easy to remember. It is publicsquare.nashville.gov. You can bookmark that and have it handy. And I think that we've discussed having committee chairs kind of drive discussion on Council Connect. So if there's a topic that you want added, email councilconnectsupport@nashville.gov and we will add it. And you can kind of see on the site, what we'll add is basically your first comment to kick off the conversation. We're still waiting, I think, 10 people to register. 10. We got a few last night. So once we register everyone, we're going to kick off this new email notification system. So currently, we are emailing notifications to council members of new forum creations and new topics that are posted. Currently, we've got 1 forum. It's like a general forum, and within that, there are the 3 topics, stormwater policy, missing middle housing, and board and commission appointments. And whenever those are posted, everyone on council is notified that they're posted. The email is sent manually by staff once the topic is live and ready for comment. But starting, I think, March 15th,
Yep.
Hopefully, if we can get everybody to register, we're going to set up an additional email notification for everyone anytime a comment is posted on a topic. So right now, you can opt in to receive comments through the site to any replies to your comment, but you'll only get notification of direct replies to your comment.
Right.
What we're going to set up is it is a little bit manual, so I'll let you know kind of to opt in and out, just email councilconnectsupport@nashville.gov. But the notifications will be automatically sent through Council Connect every time a comment is posted. So once a comment on a topic is posted, you will get that comment. It will have the text of the comment, it'll have the person that posted it, and it'll have a direct link to that discussion.
A direct link back into the forum, right? And so, as you can probably tell from the way Ms. Zeitlin is describing this, this forum and format and software and platform was not really designed for how we use it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have kind of strung this together in a variety of ways to try to make it more functional and optimal. And at this juncture, though, we're kind of betwixt and between, because unless everybody can affirmatively register, watch the training video, do the terms of use agreement per all the state law stuff for the state approved forum, we can't then get ourselves to a place where Hannah kindly can load everybody in, and then we can affirmatively, every time somebody posts something in there, everybody's gonna start to kind of see that in their inbox, and I think that will help them engage better. You can then subsequently, in my view, set up an inbox rule, right? Like, I don't think it will be that much that you'll be like, oh my gosh, all the Council Connect updates, I can't manage this. But I think it will serve a purpose for a while so people can see, because if you're only getting notice when you specifically put a comment, that's not facilitating discussion. You need to see sort of the back and forth. It's in your inbox, it's on your phone, you're seeing it, you're linking in and kind of trying to do that. And we may find colleagues after a year of, once we can take it to this next level of optimization here, this next, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? And then we may need to discontinue it because it's not an appropriate use of resources. So, Ms. Island, do you want to finish, or is that particular to, okay, Ms. Stiles, you're recognized.
So I used Council Connect before everybody was using it. Do I have to re-register? Yes,
No.
I'm always
No.
before things are cool. Okay.
A lot of us returning members,
Yes.
we're like, unless you
So,
got an email
yeah.
from Hannah
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
it's-
or me
yes.
last night,
Right.
because I was like, you know, register.
Basically, I think every returning member except for one was registered, right, in this room at least, where Councilmember Weiner just wasn't here last term.
And I had to go back in.
So but she's registered, you all have registered previously.
Thank
Even
you.
started a conversation.
Thank you,
Right,
Chair.
exactly.
For your
And
You're
so,
welcome.
I will say, so we manually enter the email addresses, we're gonna do them separately. So if you want to opt out of notification on any particular topic or from comments generally, email councilconnectsupport@nashville.gov.
Right. I am encouraging us from the jump, once everybody is registered, like, we're gonna put everybody in there. And then, you know, yes, it can be opt out. But I really think to get things going, we all need to kind of be in there and be seeing it and see how it works. Again, you can establish an inbox rule, you can whatever, so.
And I will say personally, I have been getting emails every time a comment is posted. It has not been like particularly onerous. It's been pretty easy to manage. One last thing I want to say is that this, Council Connect site is really mobile friendly. So if you've
Yes.
been using it on your desktop or your laptop and you haven't gotten on it on your phone and you want it to be, use it on your phone, it looks great on your phone. It looks normal. You should be able to use it pretty easily on your phone.
Yeah, it adjusts, what is that called when it's compatible with the, right?
Mobile friendly?
Yeah, mobile friendly.
It is,
It's mobile
it is a
friendly.
mobile-friendly
Yes.
platform. Thus, yes, create that tab or whatever in my 247 open tabs on whatever phone or computer I'm on. But do y'all have any more questions for Ms. Zeitlin? Or, okay, all right.
If we have forgotten our login information, do we reach out to you?
You can, you should just be able to go in and reset your password.
And just reset it.
I think I maybe logged in on the computer, but I tried to get on my phone. I was like, I don't know my information.
Yeah, and so we set up everyone's, username and everything. So it will go to your nashville.gov, like the reset your password.
Yeah, so it is obviously your .gov email, and I think there is just like forgot my password or something like that you can do that. So thank you all again for your continued engagement as chairs to help us try to get this going. And we'll see. We have set a deadline. We have reminded a lot. When they start, no, I'm not gonna call people. Okay, thank you, Hannah. Appreciate all your
you.
work on that. And a special thank you to Hannah and Kenya with
Kenya has
ITS, who has
incredible.
been working in tandem with Hannah. We have been in touch with Granicus. There are a lot of things that we've asked for that, kind of can't be done. And we have pushed on that and tried to get some things improved. So we're
It's a continuing conversation.
correct. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. Appreciate you. Okay. So back then, just to administrative services updates. I do just want to thank staff, Ms. Hayes, Margaret, Melanie Cruz is here on staff, and they have all been coordinating, and we've been talking about kind of back-of-house optimization on some of the pathways of how we make requests in the office, to get that into kind of a unified email and kind of a system behind house of how that gets assigned, how you are acknowledged in receipt of your request, and the confirmation that it's being done, and so forth. So I really appreciate the marriage of technical skills that we're making and a long time experience in the office of just knowing what it is we're asking for and needing. And so, we are looking, I think, Margaret, at this point of getting maybe early April, hopefully, to a place where we have a kind of a specific document to share with you all and everyone of kind of how that is going to work. Wanted to share also, I know Eleanor Carter on our team in a comm space is our new PIO, who started in early January. And of course, we've had, snowmageddon and sicknesses and all these things. And, we are getting some new processes in place, particular to press and press releases and so forth. And so, but we're needing to get absolutely standard operating procedures for that, right? And when do we do what and for whom, and kind of all those operational processes. Margaret is kindly working very hard on that to make sure we've got all those things in place. So just all that to share, kind of good back of house work happening, and we're just wanting to make sure that we cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and we're mindful and respectful of staff and kind of new positions that we have in place to support members and respond to kind of how they want to be supported. So I would welcome any questions from you all on that. I know that's a little bit just sort of general, but wanted to touch base with you on that because I know there's a lot of care and concern around that. So.
I don't really have a question. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
working
please.
this. I don't really have a question as much as of a comment that I appreciate the output, I guess, of things we've gotten so far around communications, and especially like some of the kind of more social media friendly graphics that I have not had to create myself has been very helpful. So
Yes,
I
yes.
think it's a good use of
Kudos
resources.
to Melanie, who is here, bringing that skill set to the team. So
Yes, very nice.
lovely there, right. And so
I can't do this stuff. God bless your heart.
So Chair Wiener is showing a convening about kind of the history of the charter. She is the chair of our charter revision committee, and so I do want to also thank staff, because in y'all's leadership of your committees on things that are of general public interest and awareness and safety, whether it be safe places through public health and safety, and that was supported by Ms. Cruz and staff to kind of get that public communication out. And we will have to be mindful with a 40-member body, right? Like, it can't be every member's all the things, although, right, we have to kind of level set on what are we going to give some programmatic attention to. And so then I am looking to you all in your leadership, right, for that, right? So if it is something through your experience, you are aware there are some good synergies, but we can't be doing kind of all the things and creating all the graphics and doing all the different things, right? Like, we need to kind of continue to confer with each other and set some priorities in that regard. So I appreciate everybody being in touch with me so that we can make sure that we're not kind of overloading staff. We have a great new skill set in Ms. Cruz to create some of these things, but we can't kind of then have 40 members being like, will you create this for me and that? And so that is part also of that administrative services proposal, where we're, again, kind of putting up the guardrails for those asks. So Ms. Stiles, and then Chair Bradford. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Actually, I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
One is in regards to the PIO and the 20th anniversary reception. Is that something that falls under their purview, so I can know that now, or else I need to do my own press release?
That is a good question, and I think, again, that's why we kind of need advance notice on some of these things. I appreciate, like, when you and I first spoke about it, right, like, is it under the auspices of the Women's Caucus, or is it, you know, in partnership with me, it's every woman who's ever served on this council before, and we're inviting them back. And so part of what we're kind of looking at as part of this administrative services proposal, the standard operating procedure for the PIO and the press releases is, and we'll see it here from a scheduling perspective, where do caucuses fit in all of these things? And
Okay.
so if it is an initiative of a caucus, then from a hierarchical, not hierarchical, but just the volume of the work and then where that falls. So that is still kind of an open question, Ms. Stiles, as to what, from a press perspective, we're going to be doing relative to caucuses. Because, but.
So we'll hold, so I'll just do my press release for that, and I'll wait for you all to finish out your system
Right.
of figuring out, okay.
But I think, you know, sometimes there absolutely is a synergy there, right? I mean, we are a majority woman body now, led by a woman vice mayor, in partnership with the Women's Caucus. Again, there is always a little bit of nuance or gray area there between some of these things.
It does have a good, it has a good national spin, so that is why.
Understood and appreciated, yes. And so, from my perspective, I just want to get us to a place where we are fairly serving, right? So if I do it for one caucus, I have to do it for all the caucuses. And so that's why we're trying to get to kind of this standard operating procedure. What are the services that we can provide for caucuses, because they are not officially entities of this body. They are kind of external, but because they are members of this body, they require the same notice. They do meet here, and it's just sort of figuring out in the broad spectrum of all the things that members of this body want to do, where can that fit in? So I appreciate and do have an awareness of the desire and the need there, and I'm sorry we're not quite at a definitive space to say yes, no, but we're still working on that.
That's
So,
an answer,
yeah.
that works.
Okay.
Second,
Yes.
second question, Lord, it fell out of my head. Ask
Okay, we'll go to Chair Bradford and then back to you. Yes, sir.
So to the point you made about just bombarding council office, because we only have one PIO for 40 members, when it comes to press releases or any kind of graphics, once a standard template for colors, whatever, I don't know what program you use. If it's Canva, that's great because that's what I use, but like if there's any kind of standardized icons or colors or templates for documents, if those could either be sent to us or put in someplace where we can grab them that way, you know, if we know that it may be a busy week, because I do this a lot with resolutions.
Right.
I go through and I do it myself and send it over for it to be proofed by Hannah. So that could be something we could do so that office is not being overloaded. Is we can make it ourselves, send it over for like a review to make sure that it checks out, and then that way that's less work. They're not having to create from scratch. We're doing it, sending it to them for the review, and then.
Yes, absolutely. So, council staff team is doing a great job kind of back of house, getting some of these standard templates, but especially kind of in that press release space, right? Like, so, Ms. Carter is the PIO to the council body, right? Collectively to us as a group, as the Metro Council. That is not to thwart you all's individual ability as an elected official to put out a press release, but we have to be very careful about how we do that, because you may have opinions that are not held by the larger body. And so you are a member of metropolitan government. There's your seal, there's your thing, you have the things that you have. But we may need to again, from a supportive standpoint, but just a clarity standpoint, if you're gonna use the standard template, that template comes with a caveat, right? This is the whatever of an individual member, et cetera, so we're just sort of sussing out and talking through some of those things. We just need to make sure it is clear if you put out a press release particular to your district, your opinion on any particular thing, that no one would infer that that is the position of us collectively as a body.
Then to that point,
Right.
I guess to kind of clarify that, when those templates are made, maybe set it so when we get the template, we can go in there and it could be just like from the office of blank and have everything else. So we can go in there and say from the office of Russ Bradford. That way when it comes out, it's being inferred, it's coming from me or, office of
Exactly
Councilmember
that.
Aaron Evans.
Exactly that. That's great
Metro
feedback.
Council.
I appreciate that. We are thinking about those things. So I think, all these things are interrelated and sort of converging and at different places. And I think, in early April, hopefully then we're bringing back a more a full proposal, or it might be mid-April. I see Margaret tilting her head at me.
There's a lot, and there's the things that are being raised also kind of set off some legal concerns that we have to work through, and that's one of the things that we're looking at right now to
Right,
see
right.
what, as the Vice Mayor was saying, what goes out from the perspective of the council and what goes out from the perspective of a council member, and what is, what's appropriate
Right.
in this context.
And how do we make that distinction clear? And just, so for the public's general awareness or new members of the body, like this body has never had a PIO, right? We have not ever had that sort of press function. That is something in, running to serve in this office, I heard from members was a need, but we have to still remember then that it is about the collective work of the body, right? So, when there is, hypothetically legislation of countywide import, right, that is passed by this body, you would set up basically just a rubric or a template. Lead sponsor gets one quotation, related department, right? So it's not preferential, it's fair, it's clear. But, we have as a body doing the legislative work, we've really sometimes relied on, the press about that is because one of us maybe went to the mayor's office and signed the bill, and then the mayor's office puts out all the press about often what is, 100% the legislative work of this body, right? So we're just trying to strike that balance, but, we've got to be real clear. And I'll admit we had one little misstep. A caucus did put out a press release that was not within the framework, that was a mistake, right? And that's no disrespect to that caucus, and that's a positive thing that we absolutely want folks to share. But we have to make sure, if something is going out like that, and the quotations, those need to come from individuals. They cannot be inferred to be coming from the body collectively. Like, there's just certain kind of rules we need to put in there for clarity. So
My second question, or after you're finished.
we're going to go back to Chair Stiles, who recalled her first question, or second question. Right?
So as we're talking about streamlining communication, which I think is amazing, I'm loving everything that's happening this term. It's making things a lot easier. I still have a question in regards to meetings, how involved council staff is in meetings. Is it coming up? Okay.
Committee and caucus scheduling will be next on the list.
Well, it's
So,
not
yep.
committee and caucus scheduling that I'm
Okay.
asking about.
Okay.
I am seeing a trend now of lovely Rosie hosting meetings after 6 o'clock for council members, and now it's not just one, it's multiple members. So I'm just trying to understand here, if we are responsible for our own districts and hosting our meetings, how is council staff hosting online meetings? I think it's excessive. There are 40 of us, there is one of Rosie.
Right. Yep.
We all ran to be responsible, then we need to be responsible. Because then it also gives constituents this impression, like, well, what are you doing? And why is it different? Why aren't
Understood.
you using the office? Well, because I've never have been, so
Right.
I'm not switching.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think, historically, staff has very, very kindly been and you have discussed this, been responsive to. If any member made a particular request, staff very kindly accommodated that request. Then what might happen over time, whether through constituent mention or yourself becoming aware, oh wait, I didn't know staff could do that for me. And so what we're trying to get to is just sort of level setting. What, given our current staff, can we support fairly to every member, right? And if we are going to offer it to every member, what does that mean, right?
And if we can't, are we going to then say, staff, you can't?
Correct, we are.
Okay,
We
excellent.
absolutely are. And
That's what I
that's
need.
kind of where we're trying to get, right? But we also have to respect and appreciate that all staff has been doing is very kindly supporting members who have asked for
Rosie
those
is
things,
amazing.
right?
There's absolutely no
yes.
questions about that.
Right.
She wears angel wings.
Yes.
But we are being excessive, some of us. And so I just want to be, I want to get to a point where we get to the point where we say it's working and everybody gets to use it, or it's not, because it's been going on now for a long time.
And, you know, coming with that then also is just some standardization of the support. Do members need support in understanding how to set up a WebEx meeting for their community meeting themselves, right? And sort of saying, like, this is how you set up a community meeting, and here's where you go, and here are the resources, right? And, right, like, we've just sort of got a level set on that. So I do appreciate that. That is all a part of this kind of administrative services proposal that we will get there, but it's just sort of, there are legal questions, as Margaret has shared, there's the convergence of caucuses, committees, individual community support, there's the press piece, there's external, there's internal, like all these things that fit together, and we're just kind of trying to get there. So I hear you, and yes, that's what we want to afford all members the same services, and what those services are clear, and it's not just by happenstance because somebody asked for it, we do that for these folks, and then other people realize, like, oh, well, I would have asked for that if I'd known, right? That kind of situation. We want to get away from that. So, okay. Anything else on administrative services updates? Yes, sir.
Just one quick question
Yes.
in regards to like the PIO and the press. So if we did a press conference, is the press room downstairs, is that just for the mayor's office, or is that for all Metro? Like, if we wanted to do a press conference, in the past, we've either done it outside or in other places. Would there be a more centralized spot, whether it's in the council office, or can we use the one downstairs?
That is on my list for this conversation in the future. At present, that is the mayor's
That is the
space.
mayor's media room.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to look at what we could do to have a council media room.
Potentially, I will make a note of that. Chair Bradford has requested
Who wants to give up their office?
a council.
I hear a renovation of the council's second floor coming.
Oh, it's been planned.
Yeah, I know.
We just gotta get the money for it.
Right.
Back in the day.
That, I think we all acknowledge that we have some space constraints and challenges, and our office is not particularly designed optimally for how we work right now. We also have the sort of looming pending question to be litigated, will we be a 40-member body or be a 20-member body? And so I don't feel like we can renovate our office for a 40-member body
Not yet.
with, right, 3.5 years in a term. That's just not a good use of public resources. We have to know definitively what we're working with, and then once we know that definitively, then we can re-engage those conversations. So
But we got a lot of space to work with either way.
we do. There's a lot of underutilized
Lots of it.
space, and
Lots of
we're kind of constrained over here, less constrained over there. It's there have been a fair number of conversations about it, but we kind of just put pause on it because of this pending
Outcome.
matter. So, okay, so with that, we will now move into committee and caucus scheduling. You have before you a proposal compiled by Director Darby in concert with staff that works in this space, Ms. Godin and others, in getting us scheduled. And so this is a draft proposal for our discussion. And Margaret, I guess I put it to you, please, to just kind of introduce what's proposed here.
Sure. So the first paragraph is talking about the purpose and the reason for doing this, and we just want to make sure we've got some good guidelines for the communications between council members and staff on scheduling meetings. Everybody has been very eager this year to get their meetings scheduled, and so everybody keeps trying to schedule on top of each other, and we're trying our hardest to, get things scheduled for you when you want it, who you want, all that kind of, the place you want it, but, resources are limited. And so this kind of addresses the scheduling resources that are available. And so the first part of this kind of talks about priorities of the different types of meetings that we have. Obviously, we're not going to schedule special meetings or caucus meetings on, during the council meeting. That's, that's kind of a given. But it talks about the priorities, the first one being, regular meetings and committee meetings. One of the concerns that has, I think, come up kind of repeatedly is having guests at your regularly scheduled committee meetings. And so, the idea here is not to say no guest at your meeting, but if you are going to have a guest, keep it under 10 minutes, and you need to let us know in advance so that we can put it on the agenda so that we know who's coming to the meeting and can notice it properly. This is
And Margaret, may I interject that would not preclude, if you do have an agenda item that is chair report, staff update, again, in a kind of 2-3 minute type space, right? We're not trying to catch staff out, right, on anything, but if there's a matter that has been kind of coming up through committee, you need a little bit of an update for, it's been discussed, and somebody's there as a department representative, you can absolutely, as chair, pose an inquiry and get just a brief update from them. That's a little bit different than kind of the short guest that absolutely should be on the agenda. So encouraging members to, give themselves a little bit of that time at the top of the agenda potentially, but respect that time relative to your legislative agenda. So
we're talking about something that's more than 10 minutes. So if you have someone that you want to bring in that's a longer, it's a 15-minute kind of presentation, you want them to have that special time to say something to the committee, and I think you have almost had no meetings, but I think everybody's had one of these types of presentations. So the idea here is that you let us know in advance, let us know by the filing, the regular legislation filing deadline, that Friday filing deadline. That will be helpful for us when we are planning the schedule for committees for the council meeting dates and that Monday, because as you know, those dates the times kind of fluctuate a little bit. And so this way we can say, okay, well, public health and safety has got something on, an additional person on there, and so we're going to be able to give you a little bit more time, or, if we have an idea that you're going to have a lot of legislation, maybe we encourage you to move it on to another date or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. As you know, we don't schedule committee meetings on the Monday or Tuesday of council weeks if there is no legislation pending before your committee. So this doesn't change that plan. And then no presentations, would be happening on those condensed dates. So when we have the Monday holiday, which we seem to have a lot of, that Tuesday when we have to get in here and do everything in a condensed period of time, no 10-minute meetings or 10-minute presentations there. Next priority would be special called council meetings and special called committee meetings. And this, includes standing committees, subcommittees, executive committee. Let's see. I think the idea here is that regular council meeting dates would not be available for your special called meetings, but vice mayor would be the person who can kind of waive that rule. Do you have a question about this, or do you want to get to the end?
Maybe, Margaret, to break it apart, do you think kind of 1 and 2 present a logical chunk here, and maybe we can take some questions or input on 1 and 2, or, okay. So, Ms. Stiles, you're recognized if it's kind of relative to 1 or 2, what we discussed thus far. Okay.
So, I sent an email regarding having guests up until May. So I don't know in advance if one of the meetings is a Tuesday where I don't have legislation. So if I have someone coming what then happens with this
I think
policy?
it'll need to go to another meeting, and that's why the scheduling those types of guests, it's, you don't want to schedule them too far in advance, but you also don't want to schedule them the Friday before the meeting. So that's why we're looking at that Friday filing deadline, because then we have some idea of the legislation that's coming through. We'll know that, administration legislation gets filed by noon that day, all the council legislation, except for, late filed stuff, that all gets filed that day. So we'll have an idea whether you will have an agenda to even attach something to.
Okay. I don't think this is in the weeds, so I'm going to ask a question. So for this upcoming Tuesday,
Okay.
I have someone coming, a guest coming, and I do have legislation. So as long as we have the agenda, I know that I had said I was going to have a guest, so you just need to have the agenda by last Friday?
We need to know.
Tomorrow, sorry.
We need to know who your guest is, so we can put it
Okay.
on the agenda.
Okay.
And so, we start to plan the schedule for the regular dates. Like that, I think that it went out yesterday. I think the schedule went out yesterday. So we'd start planning that, Monday we start looking to see how much is going on and what, start figuring out when meetings are gonna start. Cause you'll know your meeting doesn't start at the exact same time every
Right.
week. Like sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 4:45, sometimes 5:15. It doesn't start at the same time. So if we know that you need a little bit of extra time because you have that guest coming in and you only have 2 items on the agenda, then we can try to schedule that and work it out with all the other things that are happening that day as well.
And it affords staff the time to extend more courtesy to you and your guest, right? Because then they can pull your meeting forward 10 to 15 minutes for that, right? If
We
they
can try to accommodate everything as opposed to finding out the Friday before the meetings, then you're already locked in for your time.
Right.
We don't have.
And thought being that Friday deadline, now that we do have the internal legislative calendar that I've sometimes referred to as the yellow calendar, but then Margaret told me no, in Outlook, people pick different colors. It's not yellow for everybody.
I think mine's red.
Yeah, but they
Purple.
so I'm sure people are like, what do you mean the yellow calendar?
Notice
Yellow.
I'll change color to yellow.
Yellow on my phone, but the council legislative calendar, right? So that we can then, legislative filing deadlines, Friday. So knowing then as a chair that Friday filing deadline is the date to get staff, if you're going to have a guest and want to kind of, stretch that meeting time a little bit, and you've got legislation coming, established standing committee meeting, then that affords them the time to, but prior to the committee schedule being set, to give you the extra time that you need. So I know it feels like, ooh, that's way ahead, but I think that's sort of the cadence that we're on. It's already on the calendar, and if we start to sort of operationalize, I would suggest that Friday, then then you kind of don't get caught in between.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah. Ms. Evans, yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
I feel like number 2 or number 1 was written specifically for me with all the guests that I have.
Right, you and me both.
So I guess, all that is very clear, and I appreciate the information, and I will work to abide by the policy. And I can think of
This is a draft policy at this
Sure.
juncture for your feedback. So,
Okay, and so I think there's the only challenge that I've had so far, I think in general from a guest perspective, is when I had to invite somebody to speak that had an issue that was urgent and countywide, that took up some time that I did not intend on having come, kind of at that meeting. And so I guess kind of thinking about, in addition to the individual guests coming from a department to kind of speak about their department or whatever, the idea of issue-based presentations. I can think of an issue that needs to come to the committee, and there needs to be kind of a presentation, but at the same time, I don't want to have to compete for dates around a special called meeting and those kinds of things. And so are we able to leverage, if you know in advance and there's legislation and it fits all those guidelines, that we could, if I bumped up my meeting 15 minutes earlier, I could probably fit it in within the constraints of the committee, as opposed to having to then look for another date, socialize, like who's, availability and those kinds of things. And so what is the feedback on that?
So we're trying to, allow for some flexibility in here, because there are some instances where there is something that's an emergency or what have you. And so if we know about the emergency is a different issue, but if we know about something like that in advance, letting us, more than likely, your committee has items on the agenda. You're one of the committee that pretty much has items on every agenda. But, we can move things earlier for you. So we can start your regular meeting earlier so you can have, an additional 15 minutes, but we need to know about it in advance so we can properly schedule and notice it for open meetings purposes.
So so it sounds like that is a possibility, so I don't have to go, oh, how many special called meetings have been requested for these 20 dates or whatever, if I can kind of manage that time. Okay.
I would say though, and I'll let Vice Mayor weigh in on this, if it's happening every meeting and you always need like an additional 30 minute or something like that, then it starts to get to be where, we do have other meetings that are happening that we have to, coordinate everything. And is your committee able to get there early every time? Do we just start your committee early every single Tuesday?
Sure.
Tuesdays when you meet.
Okay.
Well, and Margaret and I spoke about, and I concur with you, kind of like the tension in, we all know and have committed to be here on Mondays and Tuesdays, first and third, within roughly a window. And so nudging that window, right, like if you typically have a 4 start and you want to then start earlier versus, okay, now I gotta find a date on a random Thursday and hope that my colleagues will show up. Whereas that, probably nudging that meeting forward, you're gonna have a quorum of your committee, and if it's something of interest. So I think, that is one of the things in looking at this proposal that I think is, we always wanna, when we see a pattern of something and kind of understand what that means back of house operationally, but also not kind of overcorrect for that, and also be mindful of, this is a part-time body of folks that have other employment and they reserve those evenings, but everything has a knock-on effect, right? And so what my hope is if you all as chairs can, again, mindful of your legislative agenda, mindful of organizing that agenda and going ahead and thinking ahead, what am I gonna have on consent? What are we gonna have discussion for? And then, looking at that sort of top time, that sort of chair report update thing, and, using that in a way that you've sort of operationalized that. So, if somebody was coming to speak about that, public health matter, could they have compressed that into that sort of 10 minutes that is already operationalized on your agenda? And then your committee is aware, and then you can sense from your committee that if they're all like, oh, holy heck, we want to know more about this, right? Then you've already got the buy-in from your committee members to understand, wow, this is a real big issue of community concern. I'm absolutely going to that specially called thing that Chair Evans is gonna, right? And so, not trying to kind of have one big thing be all the things for that person, but understanding sometimes that regular meeting cadence when you already have a legislative agenda, if you can kind of get some of those key things in there, then that may be helpful. But, okay.
And just also following up, it's not written down here, but it's something I know we've had discussions with different chairs about, and that's putting your presentation at the end of your meeting, so that if you do want to start something earlier so you can fit a presentation in, start at 3:30, go ahead and get through your legislative agenda, then start your presentation. That way, members that need to leave to make quorum for other meetings can leave or stay, and then sometimes we'll come yank somebody out of a meeting to come down the hallway. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's on 1 and 2. Margaret, do you want to
Sorry,
finish
yeah,
out 3, 4, 5
And
there?
there's also page 2.
All right. Don't forget, it's running back.
Can I just say, having read this, I mean, God bless, really. When I think about the nightmare of last term, so many things are solved with what is being done right now, with coming up with policy and procedure. I just want to say thank you to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Thank you.
this is
Staff,
not
yeah.
running, stepping on each other's toes, trying to figure out who can help us in council office and how do we do it, and so there are no internal Hunger Games. This is great. Thank you.
I like that, internal Hunger Games. It works, but seriously, you're right. I agree with you completely. This is super streamlined.
Kudos to Margaret. So, do you want to finish out 3, 4, 5 there?
Staff, not just me.
Yeah, and staff.
So,
No.
there's a, so yeah, 3 is special ad hoc committees, think East Bank stuff. This also would include working groups. 4 are caucuses. You'll note we have 5 caucuses now. And then 5 is educational and training sessions with a little note down there about some consideration when scheduling. I want to point out, now we have 5 caucuses, and we've gone back and looked at the number of meetings that have occurred during this time period from October through basically
Right,
a
during
couple
our
weeks
meeting
ago.
time, subsequent to orientation,
This
we
year,
have.
we've had 19 caucus meetings during that time. Last year, we had 10, and the year before that, we had 8. So we are up significantly.
I asked Margaret, I was like, could y'all total all these up? How many specially called, how many caucuses, how many, right? So.
Congratulations, everyone, we're trying to get work.
So it's a lot for caucus meetings. Okay, so moving on to page 2, this is kind of the process portion for scheduling meetings. And this really just puts into writing the things that we do right now. So 1, request the meeting and provide the information to staff. And that includes, where you want to meet, the date, the time, are you inviting guests, what kind of services do you need? Is there going to be a PowerPoint presentation? Do we need tech in the room? Do we need M&N? Are there going to be handouts? That sort of thing. Also, we'll need to get the contents for the meeting agenda. We are required to post that 48 hours in advance of the meeting. There's a sentence in here that's very important. So if there's a Monday meeting, that 48 hours is not Saturday. It's Friday. Okay? That has to happen. We can't have it in on, 48 hours is 48 hours, it's not 48 business hours. Let's see, number 3, we'll look at, we'll work with you. This isn't, hard and fast, like, you're violating rules. We're gonna work with you. If you wanna meet on a certain day and there's something else there, we're gonna help you find another day, another place, that sort of thing. We have lots of places to check now to see if there are other conflicts going on. Nashville.gov, there's a calendar for all of these rooms, there's a calendar for legislative matters, and there's a calendar for events and training. We have to check all of that in order to determine whether the date is appropriate. Sometimes things still get overlooked, like a planning commission meeting.
Right.
So, it's all, all this information is input by humans and then reviewed by humans, so nothing is perfect, but we try. We will take the steps to post the public notice on Nashville.gov, which while we put information in all these other places, Nashville.gov is the official place to get information. That is where your agenda has to go. That's what the public is going to be looking at to find out that there's a meeting happening when and where. Let's see, we won't be providing scheduling assistance for caucus meetings that are happening in non-metro facilities. I also, and I've said this to some caucus members, I don't know if the caucus chairs, I don't know if the people in the room have received this information from me, but You ought not have your caucus meeting at a non-metro facility because it's not necessarily a public place. So, I know like maybe some caucuses are small and you want to go to a restaurant or something like that and have your caucus meeting there, it still technically needs to be publicly noticed. But because you're not in a public location, does the restaurant know, or is it, I don't know how many guests come to your caucus meetings, but if you're in a restaurant, are you planning to have people stand around the table and watch you eat while you talk about caucus business? You need to be mindful of things like that. Is there an age restriction for the location? You can't have your meeting there because it has to be open to the public.
You mean no bars?
No bars.
No margaritas?
Is there a cost to get into the door for the location? Can't have your meeting there. It's not a public location. Members of the public of all ages need to be able to attend the meeting. So it would be my advice to caucus members to always have your meetings in a metro facility, whether it's a community center or this building or Howard office building or wherever, schools. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox on that front. Let's see, and then, of course, when you have your meetings in this building, we will provide you with the parking passes for members of the public that attend.
Chair Evans, you're up.
I just had a question on the, on 3B in particular. Is that rooms calendar visible on our Outlook or only yours?
I think it's visible in your Outlook.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you should be able to.
So I can at least kind of do a cursory, like, what's happening? What, do we have any rooms available? Like, as opposed to emailing somebody to go.
Do you use, and this is kind of a question, do you use Outlook on 365 or do you use the Outlook app on your computer or tablet?
You can't see it if you use it on your computer.
That's not.
Because that's how I do it. You can't see it.
And I can
don't
show
know
you
how.
how. You can
Well,
view
see,
your
there you go,
calendar.
techno skills again.
So, and what I was about to say is, I know how to do it on the desktop app.
Okay.
When it
There's
comes
some
to.
materials right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, Sean.
Chair Parker may know how to do it on 365 because I bet he's more skilled than I am on stuff like that.
Technologically savvy.
But I did sit down with another chair, and I won't name the person who's not here. Sorry. That we tried to figure out how to pull up these calendars on 365, and I could not do it. And so I know there's a way to do it, but it's called helpdesk.com.
Okay, I didn't know if
Sorry.
it was like a permissions thing. I hadn't noticed it before, but I will make a point to look at it and
I
see
don't
if
think it's a permissions thing.
Okay.
If you still can't find it, let me know, and we can find out.
Okay, thank you.
Right, yeah. And I do think,
Go over that with you.
yeah, absolutely. I would just, interject that is, I think for your awareness, right? But in the end, because things come along and get scheduled and so forth, are gonna have to get that sort of final check from staff, like,
Oh, yeah,
because
the
you might,
scheduling needs to happen through our office.
Right.
You can look at it to see if that room's available or something. I think you can, let's confirm, but I think you can
Right.
to see if the room's available. But
Because Councilmember Hancock schedules her meetings up there in the conference room through her Outlook.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to, you know how you gotta socialize the dates with 50,000 people, and that's a
Right.
good starting point, so I appreciate
Yeah,
that
and
information.
it can absolutely be difficult to arrive at that date. And so I think the one thing I would say too, as to the kind of framework that's established here, right, just because educational and training sessions kind of come at the very end, again, let's all kind of respect each other in the work that we're doing, right? So like if you've been working with the department for a month and a half to get an educational training session, then like don't come in and like, oh, well, my thing is further up the list, so like now you're gonna bump, right? Like, yeah, just kind of we have to be mindful of that. Obviously, we have to establish some sort of framework, but also in the midst of all that is still general courtesy, right? Like, because we understand if we're having somebody come for an educational session with a department, they've done a fair amount of planning, it's been on the calendar for 6 weeks, et cetera. So I think we all, within this framework, are, just like if I looked and saw that there was a minority caucus meeting or an LGBTQ caucus, I would never say, oh, this educational session, I'm gonna put it right on top of that, y'all get out, right? But that's not what this is intended to do. It's just sort of helping you all understand the kind of, I don't even want to say hierarchical, but just like the decision tree, right? Like there are the standing committees of this council. There are the meetings of this council. Then if this council, we have Snowmageddon again and it needs to get moved. Well, if we have Snowmageddon, your caucus or something, like that might get bumped, right? But that's because that's a standing meeting, standing committees, whatever, working down that kind of list. So, are there any additional questions particular to this draft? Chair Wiener.
The only one I have is that we haven't mentioned, as we noted earlier, anything about planning commission meetings and not stepping on top of those, because at any given moment, one of us could be called to the planning commission meeting
Right.
if we have something going on in our district. So I just wanted to make sure we had a note about that.
Right, and I think too, the meeting, so audit committee, right? So myself, Ms. Allen, Ms. Johnson, that's 3 members that serve on that, often meeting in this or that room from a committee standpoint. I know we had a little awkwardness and I think it created some confusion for Pro Tem Suara. For some reason on our calendar, we had Charter Revision Committee.
Yeah.
Or rather commission, right? Which is not the committee. That creates a fair amount of confusion, but, who's to know, maybe Chair Wiener at any particular time might be needing to be there in that meeting and give a presentation. But no disrespect, but that's one member, right? And so we are looking like at a planning commission, ostensibly that could be 3, 4, 5, 6 council members that need to be at that, so we don't want to schedule there. Traffic and Parking Commission, we have 1 elected representative on that. If Chair Parker were doing something for Ad Hoc East Bank or Transportation and Infrastructure, knowing that his vice chair, Ms. Evan Siegel, is also serving on Traffic and Parking, he probably wouldn't want to schedule that over Traffic and Parking, right? And so that is a lot to keep up with. No one is saying that any member of this body has to remember all of that, but recognize that staff is trying to keep up with all that. And again, trying to find time for this, what do? We scheduled it on top of Planning Commission. Not my intent, right? But here we are. So just a lot of moving parts. So thank you for the mention of Planning Commission, because I think that is one, or we wouldn't want to, I would say, especially for, anything that's got a fair number of members participating or present that is related to Metro, schedule over those. So
I can just say, from an operational perspective, this is gold, not this. This is gold. So
thank you. Appreciate that's good feedback. So this is presented as a draft proposal. Appreciate your feedback in here. I guess I would say, as you read it again in detail, if it elevates any more questions, I know as we started this meeting, Margaret, we were not at quorum and we were talking about kind of voting matters or otherwise. So I did not anticipate kind of taking a vote on this, but I will kind of entertain feedback. Do you want to do another turn on this based on that feedback? What do you think we need to do?
I have a thought
next
about
step?
that, and it's something that's been percolating in my head as long as we've been talking about it. We've got several committee members who are not here that have not had an opportunity to look at this.
Fair.
So I think in my opinion, I would bring it back.
Yeah.
Once everybody's had a chance to read it, digest it, and think through it. We may look at this in 3 days and go, oh, but wait, we forgot this. And you may have other members of the committee that go, oh, but wait, did they talk about this? So I would just bring it back.
Let's put a threshold on that. So, Margaret, you want to take the feedback, and can we maybe just set a date certain by which members who are not here or just arriving, right? So you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to read this really fast. And
I was listening along, but I was also in traffic at the same time, and so I wasn't paying full attention. So I would love the chance to digest it a little more.
I'm glad that you were not distracted driving.
Are we going to try to have a meeting in a month?
I was speaking with Chair Wiener about that. So, we've met 4 times within 6 months at a busy time at the start of this term. That's something I did want to ask you all, just kind of by way of administrative services and the work we're doing here in your chair reports. Do we want to get this executive committee on a monthly cadence? Do we want to meet as needed? We've roughly been meeting every 6 weeks. And so to Margaret's point, for something like this that is very operational and much needed, I would not want to wait 6 more weeks to operationalize this. I can see us setting a deadline, Margaret, for feedback, and then.
If we could get feedback by the end of this month, that would be great. I mean, like I said, what's on page 2, which is really the kind of the meat for staff, and that is how we go about scheduling and information we need from chairs and other council members. That is pretty much what we try to follow right now. There's some things in there that are added, like times and dates and things of that nature. Feedback by the end of the month, but knowing that even if you ask me for something or ask us for something this week or next week, we're gonna go ahead and start trying to be as close to this as possible. But I'm open to tweaks here and there, or suggestions for improvement. So yeah.
I would prefer to have a monthly meeting. I feel like there's a lot going on with all of our committees, and we are all very active council members. So once a month to connect would be helpful.
Do any other members have a feeling about the cadence of these meetings?
I think 6 weeks is appropriate. It wouldn't make it every month, but it would give us more opportunities. Last term, when I was chair of public facilities, the cadence was pretty much once or twice that entire year. And I think this is, for future committee chairs, this is a great opportunity to kind of build on your leadership, build and get more experience on this committee. So having more opportunities to meet, to discuss issues, I think it's beneficial for members.
Yeah, I think
so.
Yep, go ahead.
And I believe, and it's something that we talked about earlier, just from an operational perspective, the way that I deal with my clients, we prefer monthly meetings because it offers an air of collaboration. It enhances the strength of the body. It offers us an opportunity to engage freely when we may not otherwise have that opportunity. So I would support monthly.
Monthly. Chair Bradford mentioned every 6 weeks. Ms. Stiles, you had we kicked this off by suggesting monthly, okay. Chair Parker, did you want to?
I was just going to say, if the legislative updates are going to be a recurring component of this, then maybe it makes sense to at least every 6 weeks, or maybe every 4 weeks during session, if that's an important component of this.
Right.
I think any structure will work. I mean, we can set a goal or a tempo, and then kind of as needed, because things come up. And
right. I definitely, from a goal perspective, in my former chairmanship and former terms, I wanted this executive committee to meet more and more consistently. I felt very much that was needed in previous terms, but I've not kind of said, I think in my mind I thought, well, at least 6 times in a year, right? Like we could get to that, and I think our cadence is coming a little bit. So, we're kind of falling somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, and I think to your point, in session, if we start to kind of going forward next year, that's a compressed time frame, right? Late January-ish to April-ish, and so having maybe within that window, it's a monthly cadence, and whatever we try to say 9 a year, something like that. So, Chair Evans, did you have any feedback as far as the cadence of these meetings?
I'm flexible.
Okay.
Let me just add something to that point, which I think is a really good opportunity for us to do something like that, is to think about how that would impact budget. Because when we're in the middle of budget, I don't know that we want to throw this meeting on top of that.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And so I think to Margaret's point, I would suggest, Margaret, actually, rather than waiting till the end of the month, let's just give everybody a week.
I was gonna
Like,
say, maybe
yeah.
send this to everybody's email and let them know, look, this is the draft
Yep.
with no updates to it yet. Review it, send any feedback you have to Ms. Darby by the end of next week, and that will be collected with the feedback tonight. That way they can just do one redraft instead of having to come redo this and then come back and do it again. And then at the either end of this month or first of next month when we meet again, then we can have a final copy with everybody's thoughts.
Maybe shoot for, we'll be in a little bit of a hurry-up cadence there, but depending, I guess what I would ask colleagues maybe is just a little leeway, because a lot of the things we talked at the top of the agenda, some of those administrative services proposals, things back of house with the target of early April, but knowing that that's a little bit fungible relative to making sure all the Ts are crossed and Is are dotted. But I would want us to meet again in April as early as possible. But if I hear from Ms. Darby, you know what, or staff, we just need 1 more week on this or 2 more weeks, I would rather us be coming back to address all that administrative stuff at one time. But to Margaret's point, with the general respect to this as a framework, because frankly, y'all, this is pretty much already happening now. It's just not been kind of
We just have to formalize it.
formalized and adopted by this body. I do think in the end, we need to take a vote affirmatively for our colleagues so that we are saying, this is what we want to be held to. So I don't want to push that out too far. But I would suggest 1 week for feedback on this, and then the goal to meet in early April as an executive committee again. Yes, Chair Bradford.
I was just gonna ask if it would be possible, instead of it, if time is of the essence for the administrative portion, having, once they have everything done, I guess time-wise, it may still not happen, but just like a quick, before a council meeting or in between committee meetings, say, hey, I need all the executive committee chairs to come meet real quick and we need to approve this. Or if that's even possible. And like I said, time-wise, it may be impossible, but that way we don't have to have a special meeting where that's the only thing we talk about.
We have a 3:45, we're voting on this. To completely
We can do that, but it must be scheduled.
correct, right? But it must be scheduled per these.
Scheduled, noticed, agenda, all that business, so.
For our one-item agenda, okay. Well, I appreciate, we will kind of support the spirit of that and get you the particulars based on the feedback. Ms. Hayes, you wanted to be acknowledged
I was
earlier.
just, since we're working on the admin side, we're making emails like for council requests and council, things like that. This might need to, that council email might be put in this if you need, and we're also working, we're not finished, but we pretty much are. If you request a meeting, it's got all the questions in there. What do you need? It's a form, and it says, do you need AV equipment? Do you need security? Do you need, what's the logistics of it? So when that
Awesome.
email,
All these forms. Click,
when the
click, click,
form
click, click.
comes back, it comes back to us, and it has all that in there. And even if it's a meeting notice, if it's something like through the legislative part, we would send it to the legislative part. But if it's an internal meeting like a community meeting or anything like that, so I was just wondering if maybe any kind of requests, and we have a planner set up, so each staff member on my side looks at it, and we automatically send it to a person that should be in charge of that, whether it be media or, PIO.
They
or
own that task and they would respond.
Right, they work on that
potentially.
task. An email comes back to you saying, we're working on it, we give so many days to work on it. So it's a tracking system, so any kind of
And this
request.
is information that's gonna come out later when we do the second part. This
Right.
is just kind of like a general,
But I'm saying if you're asking
Okay.
for a meeting or something, we could go on and set up that email request in there and say, so they'd automatically have it. So I'm just wanna make sure that we're all
Yeah, no,
understanding that.
I appreciate that. I think, that, to Margaret's point, kind of phase two,
Yeah.
operationalizing this, right? Like how you make the request for the things, that can come after.
That will
Yeah.
come up later when we provide with a directory of services, which we're working
Right,
on
we're
right
working
now.
on
And
that.
so it will come into play at that time, but this is the policy for the type of information that we need. So it's important, I think, to get something like this done now, because it's a recurring kind of topic.
So many things back of house coming together, colleagues, so. So, thank you. Okay, Mr. Morrison has waited here well past his supposed start time. So with that, you all have a handout from Mr. Morrison. So we're going to move on to, on this agenda, state legislative updates. And we've got this handout here. And Mr. Morrison, you now have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Pleased to be here to present a legislative report to you. I don't want you to feel like this is all-inclusive because there's so much more that's going on even at this juncture. Everything is in flux. We are really, I think you could kind of technically call this the midpoint of our legislative session. We're probably going to go another month and a half. So we've been in probably a month and a half so far, just maybe slightly over, and then we'll probably go last another month and a half to maybe two months. And so at this juncture, we're really seeing subcommittees and committees starting to close, which is signaling that now the focus is turning towards budgets. And so this is kind of at the point that we're in. And so it's really kind of a frantic period, but it's really nothing new. And so really as we opened up the session in January, I think there was a lot of carryover angst from the special session that took place during August and September. So there's still some, I think, frayed nerves coming from that. You had the brutal killing of Tyree Nichols in Memphis that spilled over. I think it carried over into the legislative session. You started to see some legislation that was passed today, dealing with pretextual traffic stops. That's one of the agenda items there, and so there's just it's been a lot of tension centered around that, and with a focus on kind of law and order. What is the balance? And that takes us into local control. When you talk about if you pass an ordinance that talks about traffic stops, should that be kind of the end all be all for your jurisdiction? So, and those things are playing out when it comes to justice and traffic and things like that. So, so I wanted to kind of give you an overview of kind of the climate and then our role as a Metro Council and our relationship with the legislature. And that's, I think, one for this year, in our first year, it's to be in a position of being a resource to legislators. Each and every one of us in this room and within the council has a state representative and a state senator. And I encourage you to maintain relationships with those members. But I would also add that we should all step out of our comfort zone and talk to our fellow elected officials outside of our county, and because we're all in this together, and we need to do that, because it's all about working together, building the relationships, and being a resource as we move forward.
Theo, if I might interject to that point, I and several colleagues, y'all attended the Tennessee Municipal League's annual legislative conference, Mr. Rutherford, Ms. Hancock, Ms. Allen, and myself. And, you know, we were sitting at lunch talking to a gentleman from Lawrenceburg, and he was talking all about stormwater and how they kind of, you know, work on those kind of fees and impacts and so forth. And then in the general session, a very robust defense of local control, particularly around some of the property tax cap proposals. A very conservative former legislative member, now mayor of Cleveland, you know, stood up and gave a barn burner about how he felt about that. Exactly making the point that you are, Mr. Morrison, about, you know, building those relationships and kind of being in touch. You know, we're all kind of stronger together, right? Like smaller cities are having bigger city problems. Murfreesboro recently engaged, right, around, you know, impact fees, was not successful in that regard. But that conference in particular, hearing people from counties and otherwise talking about some of the things that we have already long been struggling with, I think is important. And I think that's something that I've wanted to be very intentional about our engagement with Tennessee Municipal League, and that provides us a good platform, to Mr. Morrison's point, to meet those folks and build those relationships. So thank you. I apologize.
Yes. No, that's a wonderful point there, bringing that up. And I'll add to that, yes, the TML has been a tremendous resource, along with the Tennessee County Services Association, the Association of County Mayors. So just great allies, and I'm, you know, interacting with those entities constantly, and so we're working to build on that. I will move on to 1B here, which is just the election year, pointing out that that also, being an election year also makes this year unique in that you know, legislators they can't raise any money while they're in office, so they're going to want to speed things up and get as much done as they can within the short period of time that they have. And so you know, under our state constitution, their number one responsibility is passing a balanced budget. You know, they could go out of town and not do anything else, but they have to pass a budget. And so they are going to do some other things, but in addition to passing a budget, but that's a big part of where we are. And so that takes us into C, which is we're nearing that stage of budget talks. A supplemental, the governor's budget was released. He released that during his State of the State address back in February. He will release a supplemental amendment to that, to his budget, initial budget document. And that should be coming out within the next couple of weeks. And that's kind of where we are with that. Then the next section there gets us into our state legislation update. And you'll see some items here that are, we're talking bills that have been supported by council resolution.
Our resolution, right.
In the first item.
Chair Bradford here elevated the carbon monoxide alarms.
Yes.
Thank you, kind of in response to an almost tragedy and a real kind of practical housekeeping matter, so appreciate you.
Yeah,
We subsequently passed that resolution, so that's great.
Yeah, and that's moving right along. The Senate has already passed the legislation, and now it's scheduled for a hearing in the House Government Operations Committee next week.
Okay.
And so there are just slightly more hurdles when you look at the Senate versus the House. I think you have a
Go
question.
ahead, Ms. Stiles, yeah.
Yes, so there is a there's a Senate bill currently for raising the fine limit for municipalities up to $3,000 that Senator Campbell put in, that I worked with her on, and I'm hoping it's an opportunity. So far, 35 mayors across the state have signed on in support of it, and it's in committee right now. I believe next week they are meeting again on it, but this would give us an opportunity for situations like Division Street being damaged and only 3 violations found, and they were only $50 apiece. Instead, if we could get this passed, it could have been $9,000 that we could have made off of that.
So it's just to recoup the actual cost of administering the violation.
For code violations, it's a constitutional amendment because we're all stuck with this $50 fine, which is pretty much useless in many situations. So this would allow us to take the cap to 3,000 and municipalities be able to figure out what the limits are going to be on these different items. But that would be the cap.
Do you have a bill number?
Yes.
By chance?
That
It
is,
sounds familiar, but
And Ms.
I have
Darby,
a lot of numbers in my head.
Ms.
No worries.
Ms. Johnston have some legislation, resolution
I think
earlier
it's
in the term?
next-
yes, that was before this.
Oh,
I want to say I saw it on next week's agenda in resolutions.
okay. I don't have my agenda in front of me,
Okay,
so.
yeah, and I was actually recalling that as much earlier in our term, and I think I was sort of thinking like, oh, okay, well, absolutely, TML, every city you talk to, everybody understands the constitutional $50, like, and so the last effort that was taken up, I can't even remember, a decade ago, no, well longer ago than that, because I lived in the house before, like, I'm like 17, 18 years ago, the communication, all the comms around it, like even if you supported it, you didn't know whether to vote yes or no, like it was kind of messy, I recall. So I have always understood that this would be taken up again, but I was not aware whether through Tennessee Municipal League or otherwise that was going to be sort of the priority this year. And so I guess I'm interested to understand kind of why now and what, I mean, of course, everybody supports it, but then it also, I think, needs the requisite TML, Tennessee counties, all that kind of stuff. And are we in line or out of step there? Or?
I spoke with TML before asking Heidi to put this forth, so they were supportive. They had mentioned that there was interest, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, Chair Stiles, but also like we've got to talk about this before we do that so that we can, right, as far as Mr. Morrison's resources, and I get it, these are all priorities. This is a little bit of an awkward in-between year as far as where we started and how we started, and do we pass a resolution to support it, and Mr. Bradford already had the smoke alarms in the queue and all that kind of stuff, and so I know it's a little awkward, but like, you know, if we don't know about it, and I'm not conferring with Ms. Darby and Mr. Morrison about it on our weekly cadence, then he can't be aware of it, so like we don't want to be cross purposes with each other.
It happened before all of this contractual work got finished. So when we first started meeting and you said that we were still trying to work things out with Mr. Morrison, I had already started having the conversation. So when the resolution had come up on the floor about the idea of being supportive of raising limits,
Right.
there wasn't even a caption bill at the time, like from Councilmember Johnston, the people she was working with hadn't filed anything.
Okay.
And then I had been having conversations, not knowing that she had also been having conversations, so this is what ended up getting filed.
Okay, and so
So-
the earlier resolution that Ms. Johnson put forward, I want to say, colleagues, what was that, like October?
Early, yes.
I apologize, did we pass that?
Yes.
We did, okay, all right.
She wasn't there, but we were in support of the general notion of like, yay, we do need to raise.
Okay, so that said, and Mr. Morrison will probably touch on this, on the House side, there is a new rule, which I absolutely appreciate, that requiring a supporting resolution from the local body for anything. So I guess we box checked on that, but I appreciate you mentioning that.
I guess this is a clarifying question. Is it a box check if we were previously in support of just the idea, but there wasn't actually a bill? Like, so do we then
Yeah,
have to
because
do
I
a
think that resolution was asking the Tennessee
It was
legislature to take
asking
it up.
To take it
Right.
up.
But
And so now we
there's a
actually have the
resolution in
bill.
support of an actual bill.
So if that's the case, then we can do that. I just wanted to make everyone aware that this is, I've been waiting
Why
for it to
don't we
become
look
like a
and then do
full fleshed out bill.
Pardon? Let's look and then do it if we need to.
Yeah.
Okay. Margaret, I'm looking at you.
I'm trying to find, I'm trying to do research on my phone and it's not,
It is not easy.
I don't like doing that. I prefer
As I've heard the other
computer.
day, there's
It's
little
not
internet problems and there's big internet problems.
Yeah.
You're trying to use the little internet.
This is a little internet problem.
Big internet, just laptop.
Little internet in my phone.
I can- yeah,
I heard that, I was like, I feel attacked.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, in order for us to request Mr. Morrison to support or oppose a particular piece of legislation on behalf of the council, we need to have legislation on
Already
topic.
filed.
On topic. And passed. I mean, we need to have approved something to speak for the council so that he can go speak for the council using that. With regard to, you know, monitoring what's happening up there and letting us know about stuff, we don't need to have legislation to ask him to monitor certain things. But in order for you to go up and say, the council wants A, B, C, and supports it or opposes it, we need to have legislation as a council on that topic.
So in the long and the short of it, does the general piece of legislation count, or do we need to do the specific?
I would need to look at the general piece of legislation,
Okay.
which is what I was just trying to find,
Okay.
to see what's out there.
Okay.
And two, Mr. Morrison will have to know through which committee that travels. I mean, the general,
Yeah.
Mr. Moore can,
Yep, it's,
Yeah.
forgive me, SJR 0922.
SJR 922, okay, got it.
in the new rule about a local resolution, is that applicable entirely on the House side or just through stuff that's gonna come through local government? Remind me, is it a committee rule?
That is, well, generally, everything that pertains to
Local.
government will go through that local government committee.
And can you share sort of that rule such as it is? I know it's just maybe been articulated verbally by the chair and is not actually written somewhere.
Right, yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Chairman John Crawford said that that's their rule, committee rule. If you have legislation that's coming through their committees, they will not consider it unless it has been adopted by the local government.
Right,
Okay,
and so
great.
that's why we've gotta kind of be
Yes, Understood.
in conference
Yeah.
with each other, because if that is advancing, you don't want that to hit that wall and then boom,
Understood.
you're out for the, okay.
Yeah.
I apologize,
No,
okay.
no.
Back then, we were at 2A, B, we are on 2B.
Yes, to be, or not to be. Okay. Second item that has been supported by a council resolution is the passage of sewerage waterworks projects via ordinance or resolution. House Bill 1967 by Miller, Senate Bill 2162 by Yarborough. The Senate has adopted, they've already passed that legislation, and that bill currently resides in the local government committee. So it is progressing smoothly, and what this would do is allow for these types of projects to be adopted by resolution rather than an ordinance, so.
Presently, it is by ordinance.
Yes.
Former chair of Public Works here, current chair of Transportation and Infrastructure, having to read all of that.
Right.
And so then that just gives our body the discretion. Yes, you still have to,
But only one time.
but just one time.
It'll clean up our agendas substantially,
That's it, yeah.
and 99% of these are not quite ministerial, but non-controversial,
Exactly.
and so I think if that, I appreciate everybody's hard work on that. I know Director Darby, you've been working on that for a while as well, so
Yes.
hopefully that will work out for us.
Yeah, it's working out so far. That's been a strong selling point. So, the efficiency aspect of it, and then the fact that it's permissive for the municipality, so that
Have to do
if
it,
you still, if you want to do the ordinance, you can do the ordinance. Okay, now.
Flipping over your handout to number 3.
3A.
And I think you already touched on that.
Yeah, I touched on the pretextual traffic stops there. That legislation is passed today, actually.
Both
And,
chambers or just the House?
House and the Senate. So, and that legislation now heads to the governor for his signature. The next item, we'll get into some building codes legislation. Senate Bill 2430 by Powers, House Bill 2530 by Burkhart. This legislation would prohibit local government from limiting or prohibiting the use or installation of products that meet the national codes and standards or materials that meet the national codes and standards for single-family or multifamily housing or commercial construction under 4 stories. The legislation will also delete a provision declaring that a denial of a waiver by a local government entity pertaining to construction materials does not constitute a prohibition of those construction materials.
And Mr. Morrison, who is this advanced by? And then Ms. Darby, if you can then clarify, because colleagues, you've probably all seen the companion bills, right, with the bold, this blah, blah, blah for materials, right? Like that was induced by a state law, but this would then Mr. Morrison, if you could share who's advancing this legislation, and then Margaret, if you could just share from a practical perspective what its passage would mean relative to our agenda and how we process things.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you who is advancing this. My guess would be that this is probably the contractors or home builders or someone there.
Association of Builders.
Yeah, or something to that, within that realm. But at this point, the legislation is not moving.
Okay.
So it's been taken off notice in the House. Okay. And that simply is the terminology for just taking off the schedule.
Okay.
So, but the sponsor would have the option of rescheduling if they choose to do so. But at this moment, committees are closing, the subcommittees are closing. So, and then no action has been taken in the Senate. So we're really we may not have to deal with this issue, but
Okay.
it's good to keep an eye on things. So.
And presumably, if it were to pass and as a prohibition against restricting materials, and so if we were no longer allowed to restrict materials, then we would no longer need the extra ordinance, because the extra ordinance is simply an additional, notice to everybody that materials will be restricted at this particular location. So presumably, if it passed, we wouldn't need that any longer, because we wouldn't be able to restrict materials.
Sure.
When that initial legislation was going through that required us to have these companion bills, is there a particular siding style or manufacturer who feels particularly spurned by materials restrictions? Because I just I've never been able to piece it together. Is it I'm just
Hardy board, right?
that's great. I don't,
Yeah, it's
Good old-
weird. It's kind of like, how did we get here, and then now why? Yeah.
No one wants it.
Yeah.
Aluminum siding, that's a material. I can tell you specifically in my area, we don't want it. It's the cheapest material to use. It doesn't look great, and you just have a whole neighborhood that just looks blah, because you can just get one color vinyl siding. So when we have conversations, that's a lot of what's happening in our meetings is, okay, if you're gonna do this project, we wanna see hardy board or stone or brick, no vinyl siding.
Yeah, I have those same conversations, and I bet you that's why these
Yeah,
groups
that's
are pushing it,
exactly why
because
this
they can
is
build cheaper
happening.
houses
Yeah.
and make more money. But instead, we're pushing back saying, no, if you're gonna build it, build it
Exactly.
right.
Well, that's why I like an SP. Nothing like a good SP, because you can stipulate it.
But it's also intersects kind of with conversations around affordability, right? So it's just, if you're gonna be very particular about materials, then there is a knock-on for that, because if you're requiring that, then the costs and so forth, so.
And it's all notice, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on.
I guess, do we,
But
just
it's
to
done.
follow
Please,
up on
yeah,
that,
Chair Parker, yeah.
do we know, is it home builders or multifamily folks that are, multifamily and commercial space that this is coming from?
We can ask Mr. Morrison to
Yeah.
follow
If-
up
I
with
would just
us.
love to know
Yeah,
who's-
yeah,
I can
Thank you.
yeah.
look.
Who is
look
really
into that
advancing it would be good to know.
to see where that's going.
And we can do a follow-up, Mr. Morrison,
We
if you
can,
want that to be in your weekly
Yeah.
report,
Yeah.
just incorporate it there.
I can do that
So
as
we can
well.
get on through.
Yes, the next one there is House Bill 2787, Senate Bill 2635, local building codes to include up to 4 family dwellings. That bill will be on the local government committee calendar on the 19th, next month, and then, next week. And then the Senate companion will also be up on the 19th in the state and local government committee.
Okay.
And is that, if I may, when you say local building codes, does that mean that we could use residential code for up to 4 units? Because right now I think it triggers after 2 that you have to use more stringent codes.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is kind of working through the state fire marshal to allow for that usage, to
Thank you.
have
Yeah,
that flexibility there.
Thank you, that's good to know.
Yeah, that
I
is
feel
good.
like this would make it easier for us to maybe get more affordable housing if we can build more under a less stringent code.
Right, still absolutely fire safe, but not just because you've gone above 2 units are you triggering what would typically in any other economy be like 8, 12, 15, right? It's just the threshold's a little low, as I understand it, and obviously over time, as fire safety generally has been elevated, adjacent walls and fire safety and fire times and whatever, that this is kind of a older hang-on of the past, that it's not inherently less safe to be 2 versus 4, and that it would just extend sort of the 2 individual home space requirement up to something with 4. So, yeah, okay. Property tax cap, I touched on that a little bit in speaking about the TML.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
that was-
did. Yeah, there are some competing property tax bills out there. The first one being the one that I think that really hit the news first, and that was the bill backed by the Beacon Center, House Bill 565, Senate Bill 171, that would require a referendum before any increase in property taxes. That bill has not moved. I actually spoke to folks from the Beacon Center, and they were trying to decide when they were going to move that legislation, if at all. There's another bill that they are interested in, and that is the second item here, which is the property tax cap. House Bill 1968 by Ryan Williams, and Speaker Sexton. Senate Bill 2248 by Stevens. And that bill has been highly touted by economist Art Laffer. And that bill is scheduled for the actual final calendar of the Property and Planning Subcommittee. So that committee has not closed yet, but you can look for this bill to be scheduled then. And then the Senate, State, and Local Government Committee will take up the legislation on the 19th. So we should see what happens there on that particular proposal.
And then Theo, my impression from county services, TML, like everybody across the entire political spectrum, every size of city is apparently blowing up their legislators to be like, absolutely not,
Yes, they
right?
are. Yes, they are.
Unintended consequences of approaching this, if you have a more conservative perspective or otherwise, there's just nothing good about
Yes,
this. right?
and you've probably received some talking points from the TML.
Yes,
or
yeah, if you
talking
all,
points that I've supplied.
you're all members of TML by virtue, so in your other inbox in legislative session, if other members are watching, not just our chairs, but yes, that is in there.
Yes.
They do have some talking points on that that are well made, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the third item there, Senate Bill 1946 by Wally, House Bill 2057 by Carr, is legislation that's being handled comes from the comptroller's office, Comptroller Mumpower, and this would actually, doesn't get into the rates, but, and it's not competing necessarily with the referendum bill by the Beacon Center or the property tax cap. It really gives municipalities some flexibility.
To increase the cadence of appraisal.
Yes, for
right?
their appraisals. And so we have that, so just to create that more reliable, predictable appraisal schedule.
Right, and that's one, in speaking with Assessor Will Hoy, the Tennessee Association of Assessors, whatever, they are engaged in
Yes.
supporting that, because as we have seen on our, and I always forget this, our 4-year cadence, thank you, I always think in my head it's 3, but, that, think about the value here within that time frame, and so kind of losing that value over time. So, this is not one on which I think there's any particular value in us engaging, because it is generally broadly supported. The Tennessee Assessors Association is engaging around it. So, as I understand, it is. Do you feel that it's going to move ahead, or?
I think so. At this point, it's already waiting for consideration on the House floor, and then it's scheduled for consideration in the Senate Finance, Ways and Means Committee.
Okay.
I believe it's on their final calendar, so which is really, final calendars are fast approaching for a lot of these committees. And I will tell you, a lot of times when you hear the announcement of a final calendar, it's not necessarily the final calendar, because that final calendar may have over 100 bills on it.
Yeah.
So, and then
Yikes.
don't always get to all of the bills. So, so sometimes you wait. It's a lot of hurry up and wait.
Chair Bradford,
And they don't get to
do you
it.
have a question?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So on the appraisal, that's not requiring it being every year, it's just giving municipalities the option to change their schedule less than
That's it.
4 years? Okay.
It's the option.
Permissive, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah.
the option there.
I think that still comes to us, Margaret, legislatively,
It should,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess Assessor Wilway and the mayor and our body would confer on what would be an appropriate cadence. I mean, I would say for a county of our size to operationalize like an every 2 year, like if you're a teeny tiny county and you gotta do the 2 year, but, maybe, who knows, I'm not opining on that. But I will be quiet now, but, yeah, it is permissive, and then we would, as a body, pass something, within that.
All right. Now jumping into education, there are some bills there related to education, and I do not claim to have expertise on these bills. I know we have other subject matter experts that are working on the ground,
So,
as in David Brom.
I apologize, yeah.
From with Metro Schools, the Tennessee School Boards Association. We have Robert Gowan, Elizabeth Millsaps, who also represent Metro Schools on this. But just kind of giving you the high level overview. You have the ESA voucher legislation that's moving through the House as well as through the Senate. That's referred to as the Education Freedom Scholarship. And however, the House bill is in a different format than the Senate version. And so those things will have to be worked out in the end. You can't have two different versions.
Conference committee
Yeah.
that would make them align with each other.
They would have to work.
That
yeah,
said, are
work
we
that out.
presuming it would even get to that place? Because as I understand it now, a lot of county school boards and otherwise are starting to speak up about this more in opposition to it, but will that be sufficient opposition given, I've been pleasantly surprised, I guess, about, rural legislators and school administrators and school boards passing resolutions
Yeah,
opposing this.
There's been a lot of that. You've even had homeschool advocates come out in opposition to the legislation. So there are just a lot of moving parts, a lot of stakeholders who are injecting their opinions and their positions on this legislation. So, at this point, it's hard to say whether or not this is going to pass, and even if it does pass, it may not be in its current form.
Okay.
Like I said, the House version has some what are being referred to as sweeteners that relate to teachers in terms of some insurance benefits being covered, increase, some other things that would probably hopefully try to woo some more support
Not
for
hopefully,
this
but
proposal.
for
or
the
at least-
sponsors,
or at least
hopefully,
for
yeah,
them.
right.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
hoping, I'm not pushing one way or the other on that.
Chair Evans,
Yeah.
do you have
I just had a
question?
question. Do you recall what the, if it were to pass, what the effective date is?
I can look into that, but I want to say it's the 25-26 school year.
Okay, thank you.
Don't hold me to that, but that's the year I have in my head.
Okay.
And then the second item here, Senate Bill 135, 1191 by Williams. This is an issue that had actually reared its head, I believe, either last year or the year before last year, dealing with the use of Metro property by charter schools. And we're talking even unused or underutilized property. And so
Is that
in these-
preemptive such that it would ostensibly require us to afford that property to a charter school
Yes,
group?
and if they
Okay.
choose to purchase, then they would have, first right of refusal. And so, so there's a lot going on with that particular piece of legislation that's starting to gain
Mr.
some
Morrison, I'm
traction.
going to give you 9 more minutes. So
Okay.
I know we
Oh, yeah.
had our front part of our agenda went a little longer than we intended, but I still want to
Okay.
keep this.
Absolutely, I will keep it moving here. The next item is the transportainment bill that was filed in the form of a caption, House Bill 2642, Senate Bill 2898. That bill has actually, it now has an amendment with it that maintains local control and regulation of the, I guess what are now called ETVs by the Transportation Licensing Commission. The amendment would require that a local government, and this is statewide, they would not be able to refuse to renew a permit to a business that provides entertainment transportation if the governmental entity issued the permit to the business or provide entertainment transportation prior to the effective date of this act. So that's a current permit.
So we retain local control, but we can't refuse a permit. So that is not local control. And there is a pattern of turning annual permits into rights, whether they be property rights for STR, which I just completely disagree with. But again, so ostensibly returning local control, but then saying that you literally can't refuse a permit renewal, then what sort of regulatory authority do you have? Because if you have violated all this stuff and people are falling drunk off your transportainment thing in the street and endangering people, the renewal or revocation of the permit is the regulatory authority. So,
Right.
So.
And the amendment does get into the ability to revoke unless there, as long as you knowingly, you show that there's been a knowing failure or refusal to comply with the law, ordinance, or rule or regulation. And then.
Vice Mayor, on that.
I apologize, so that we can show that there has been,
Yeah.
okay, so that doesn't take away our ability.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And to my understanding too, it also means that, Because right now, I think TLC has been denying permits because they're saying we already have too many. And I think this is basically saying that cannot be a reason to refuse a
Right.
permit.
A numeric cap, then.
So it's-
Even though
so if
there's-
there's been bad behavior or there's a justified,
Yes.
then we can
Yes.
refuse.
Okay, I appreciate the
Yes,
clarification,
yes.
So
so.
it essentially grandfathered in everybody that currently holds a permit unless they're bad actors. If they become bad actors, then we have the authority to regulate.
Right, or unless there's a dormancy
Yes.
for the permit of 6 months or longer.
Yeah, I still find that concerning because there's a finite amount of street space and traffic volume and flow, and we've done all the Connect Downtown study. We need to have priority for transportation or bikeways, all that kind of stuff. So that, like, the street can only take so many slow-moving transportainment vehicles, and I think, you know,
Yeah.
And without taking up a lot of time, I'll just say, to me, this speaks to the principle of who manages our streets, the state or the local cities. So is the state as interested in what's happening in Cleveland, Tennessee downtown, or are they more interested in what's happening in Nashville, Tennessee downtown?
Right.
To me, that oversteps their authority. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But to understand, I think I caught a glimpse of a news article. I would understand this to be largely being negotiated or managed out of the mayor's office, right? The mayor has engaged with the sponsor, Mr. Lamberth, and those conversations are ongoing.
As far as I know. yes.
Downstairs.
Yes, that's
Okay.
an ongoing discussion, and we've come a long way from having the State Alcohol Beverage Commission be in charge.
Yeah, they didn't.
That was the initial proposal, and the state ABC said, no, we don't want this, so.
Okay.
Let's see, moving on. We have drag racing, proposals to curb drag racing. We have 2 items here, House Bill 2062 by Sparks, Senate Bill 2665 by White. These are 2 Rutherford County legislators, and they are seeing the effects of drag racing in their community as we are here. The first one, that has passed the Senate. It is up in House Transportation next week. That bill would actually create a task force, a study to look at ways to curb drag racing. The second item, House Bill 2814 by Gillespie, 2710 by Taylor. That legislation would raise the penalty for drag racing. It's currently a Class A misdemeanor. That would raise that to a Class E felony. Let's see, jumping into short-term rental. Privilege taxes for affordable and attainable housing. Senate Bill 1050 by Yarborough, House Bill 468 by Hemmer. This is legislation that is not moving. However, there was an amendment put forth by Representative Hemmer to allocate in some of the short-term rental privilege funds to go towards the Barnes Fund, and has created some a little bit of some consternation. The bill sponsors approached a council member to carry a resolution to support this measure. However, that resolution was, that I did move, that resolution was dropped, and just really kind of created some problems, because we really need to work through the system that we have, and that's proper communication with Vice Mayor Henderson, communication with me as a lobbyist, to know kind of what's going on, and also to have the approval from the body.
And yeah, and we absolutely respect and appreciate our state partners, but if we, in the STR space in particular, I think we have to be mindful sometimes with, the best of intentions, right? Like on its face, let's put more money into Barnes, but the industry sometimes can use that as the, the warm fuzzy blanket and the glow of, hey, this industry is putting more money here, then there's potential knock-on effect relative to that revenue and so forth. And so, as I understand it, I think there were some concerns by the comptroller.
Yes.
And so.
Metro Finance as well.
And Metro Finance as well. And so then, then a member of this body is sort of in an awkward position because they don't understand the position of our finance department or the position of the comptroller. And then if they are asked by a member of the State House to advance something, right, and then that had to get kind of withdrawn relative to Mr. Hemmer's legislation. So again, we respect those partners, but we just want to make sure, up to the Hill we're coordinated and down in the other direction we're coordinated as well. Chair Stiles?
You started to answer my question because I was like, when did this happen? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Right, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
This is a lot.
Okay,
Any
we're
other
pushing up on 6.
Okay, here we go.
Mr. Morrison, yeah,
We
yeah.
already talked about age, so.
Yeah,
talked about
age
that
up top.
earlier.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yep.
right, that's right, we did.
Yep.
Let's see, pets, Metro Animal Control, there's some items here. I included the 2023 public chapter 335 that went into effect on July 1st of 2023. That establishes standards for shelter that must be provided to dogs under our current animal cruelty laws. The next item, Senate Bill 2513 by Lundberg, House Bill 2938 by Travis. This legislation would create a state license for commercial breeders of cats and dogs. That legislation there were some structural issues. There were some I think it was going to involve the Department of Commerce and Insurance overseeing this state licensing mechanism, and I think there's going to have to be some discussion after session on this particular piece of legislation. So that's dead for the year, and so that's where I get into my discussions with Councilwoman Weiner on the comprehensive plan that's being discussed in preparation for 2025. So I think that's the posture we need to be in, is to continue to have those discussions and then be able to come up with a comprehensive bill that could then be taken to the legislature.
Just throw in
Yeah,
a
yes,
couple of
Chair
quick
Weiner,
things.
yep.
So, additionally, because of the condensed time frame, because of we were in the middle of negotiating, getting Theo on board, we felt like it made more sense to see what was out there, get the temperature of the folks that are in the legislature for this term, and then put something together. In addition to that, having had extensive conversations with Mac and with Kathleen Murphy, and she has afforded us a lot of information that's going to be super helpful, as well as the study that was done at Mac about best practices. And the woman that did it for Mac wrote a book, and it's a best practices book, and it includes legislative suggestions. And I have just completed reading said book while I was sitting back in Memphis, and extraordinarily helpful. So we've got, I think Theo and I are going to have some good work to do.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I think, with a working group structure, right, and under the umbrella of public health and safety. It is not a caucus, Ms. Stiles. It is not a caucus.
It is a working group.
Yes, it is a working group with a finite timeframe, specific goals under the umbrella of the committee, yes. Okay, I appreciate that update, Ms. Weiner. County Powers Relief Act.
Yes,
Yep.
impact fees. You've really seen a kind of an evolution on this discussion where you've had legislators elected on kind of no tax increases, no impact fees, and then they suddenly see their community get hit with lots of growth. They go on to become mayors, whatnot, and they're in this predicament of how do we provide the infrastructure that we need to sustain all this growth. And so you say,
Sprawl
hey,
is very expensive.
how about an impact fee? So we're seeing more of that. I would point to HJR 139 that was passed that creates a TASER study on impact fees to look at that statewide. And then there was an effort last year by Representative Sapicki and Senator Hensley to undo state preemptions on local governments in terms of creating impact fees, adequate facilities type.
And they
fees
did
like
not
that.
take that up this
They
year.
were not. You're right.
Murfreesboro was engaging a particular effort in that regard. What, did that just have a come apart? Was there?
You did have that, but at this point, there's been no traction with that.
Okay. We have our chair of our ad hoc East Bank
There you go. There you
committee
go.
here. So delay
Hey.
on East Bank Authority legislation. What is happening there?
Yes, I don't know if you're following activities today or over the last few days, but the Senate, the legislation was actually scheduled to be heard today, really on a consent calendar. However, this item was bumped this morning by Senator Hensley. And then on the House side, the legislation was actually re-referred, so sent back to the local government committee. So there's been some grassroots activity by the Davidson County GOP. Rick Williams has been involved with some ground troops in communicating their angst about the creation of an authority. They feel that this is an added layer of government when
big government
they
or
consider we already have, they think we have the necessary resources in order to do the things that the authority is meant to do, the intent. So that's where we are. So we will stay tuned for that.
Ms. Evans, I can see we're all kind of side-eyeing. But I think we in this body have all been keenly aware how thin staff is, from planning to infrastructure to otherwise, in conversations rightly around the East Bank, and we appreciate our staff and everybody's been very engaged there, but that is a major clear earth endeavor, and so I think we shall see what the next step is, and I know Mayor's office is leading on that, so I'm not going to get out in front of that, but I think there are folks in this body who can speak to that, so we will be following that closely.
Yes.
Is there anything, Chair Parker, that you would want to
No, I mean,
say or about that?
I would echo that sentiment. I mean, it's a massive undertaking, massive endeavor. Really, top people across multiple departments are working on it. Some almost exclusively, some maybe exclusively. Tremendous amount of effort from the Metro Council, from the Mayor's office, and we're happy to do that for a project this size. But I do think there's some wisdom in pursuing this structure to kind of help handle some of the day-to-day operations for that 30-year project.
Yes, multi-decades,
that,
right?
that
Right.
we're undertaking
Right.
In partnership with the state. So I think
Right.
I'll be watching to see how that moves along. So.
And I think too, just from a continuity perspective, right? Like, we are term limited every 8 years. Any mayor, and this is, again, has like a 30-year arc on it. So there's got to be kind of somebody keeping up with all that. So, yeah, points well made. Thank you, Chair Parker. Okay, last item.
All right, last item, training requirements for county commissioners. House Bill 2677 by White, Senate Bill 2897 by Bailey. This legislation would actually increase the number of hours for the training for new members. And so this would not be available to an incumbent, but it would be for training from CTAS, which is the county technical, wait a minute, county technical assistance
Service.
Thank you.
And is it particular to any, like, I think we've covered the orientation and training this term, colleagues. I know, obviously, we have the water, we are the water authority, right? And we have partnered with the water department very kindly to, Margaret, like the 12 hours, the 12 hours of training. Have you all attended, I guess, your 9-hour day in the life of the water department that is highly, highly informative, and other resources by the comptroller online. And so that is a heavy lift on these members' time. Do we know specifically the addition of hours or the topics?
It's one additional hour. I do not know the topics,
Okay.
but there would be a $600 stipend to reimburse, to go towards the reimbursement for engaging in these training sessions.
Okay, alrighty, interesting. It's actually a funded mandate, okay.
That's right. But I think it's paid for.
And it's only an hour.
I think paid for by the county, though.
A $600 stipend from ourselves for something that we're required to do?
CTAS.
Okay.
CTAS, they do great work.
Yeah, they absolutely do great work. I'm interested to know what this 1 hour is about, and if you can find that out, please do let us know. So,
All right, I will do that.
members, are there any other questions for Mr. Morrison relative to the state legislative agenda? No. No. Okay. Any other, with respect for your time, but also allowing if there's anything that you needed or wanted to share by way of your committee chair report, is there anything that anyone feels is, Ms. Finger is having a convening regarding the charter April 1st from 1 to 2:30 in the jury room with presenters Dewey Branstetter, Hal Harden, Ms. Haywood, Jim Murphy, and Ms. Linda Wynn. So thank you, Chair, for that convening, that educational convening. Anything else? Yes, sir. Mr. Parker.
So I've been in conversation with Michael Briggs and some other folks on the mayor's transportation team about how the Metro Council will kind of interact with the process, how information about the transportation referendum, the potential transit improvement, I forgot the technical term.
Improvement plan, TIP?
Transportation improvement plan, I think is the technical term.
Yeah.
How that is going to come to us, and we're going to interact with it. Obviously, anything that we are considering as like an official piece of legislative business is going to go to all our standard committees, but probably the scope of this, I think there will be some additional engagement opportunities. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, so I've offered the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as a vehicle for those discussions. And we of course welcome everyone to those meetings. But if you have thoughts on what you'd like to see there, talk to the vice mayor, talk to me during a meeting, talk to the transportation team in the mayor's office. I assume that everyone here is of the 36 or 38 members who have had their one-on-one sessions with the mayor's office about the transportation team. If you have not yet, then please do that. But yeah, it kind of remains to be seen how we're gonna do that. But open to suggestions and move forward to it.
I appreciate that. I think it's a pretty compressed time frame, I would say.
Yes.
And so I've shared with the mayor's office, and y'all may have seen in your inbox from Mr. Sexton to the body just a little bit of an update, like where are the various committees, what is the plan. I'm trying to kind of compile anything that gets put out kind of by the mayor's office from a press perspective to keep up with that, and I know Chair Parker is doing the same. But I have said to Mr. Sexton and to the mayor's office, Mr. Briggs, and that team that, one of the strengths that we have as a body from a district perspective, right? Like, the facts are the facts, right? And we all kind of have the same song sheet. But I think the nuance, right, in your particular district, whether suburban or otherwise, we're all working from the same set of facts. We want to be very well versed in those facts. I think at a layer maybe deeper than just the standard FAQ. That will, I think, allow us to have kind of nuanced conversations or frame the argument and the information particular to our constituency. So I think there will be a whole lot of kind of informational, educational stuff that needs to happen. And to the extent that I can do some things in concert with you online or otherwise, sharing webinars and different things about transit, I think it's important that we all be very well versed in that, because the time frame on this is going to be pretty compressed. So Chair Bradford, you wanted to be recognized.
Yes, as far as chair reports, I just wanted to kind of follow with you. We had a conversation, instead of me doing a special call committee meeting to get council members trained on HUB.
Correct.
But has there been any updates about making that a continuing education or?
Yes, I have reached out to Ms. Williams on two things on the ITS side of the house, where they're kind of creating some video resources and things for us so far. So I appreciate that. I'm a little bit behind on that. Nothing as far as kind of time frame and what shape that may take. So I appreciate you, and we will absolutely get that done. I'm a little bit behind on it, but thank you. Ms. Evans, yes.
The only thing I wanted to mention is that one of the efforts from last term that had started at with Chair Gamble with public safety and kind of carried on the rest of the term was a focus on youth violence initiatives. And there was a lot of effort around the Office of Community Safety and those kinds of things. Well, in the mayoral transition, that team was transitioned to the health department. Now everybody is gone from that team. And so I say that to say only because there's a health department employee that's kind of picking things up. They got a grant that's specific to like technical assistance, and so there may be questions that come your way related to aspects of the grant, like youth listening sessions and things of that nature, because the goal would be to kind of get back on track, kind of look at where we are and some of those things. So, but there really isn't that team anymore. And so there's kind of an ongoing, like, what are we doing next outside of this grant? And because it's touching several different departments that all sit under public health and safety.
Right, from a violence interruption
Yes,
standpoint.
exactly.
Okay.
So there's a lot of unknowns about all of that activity from last term, and so hopefully we'll have some more clarity.
I hope so, and I know you will lead on that in your committee, because I absolutely have concerns, and we get this always, right? Like, things are in the mayor's office, and then how do they get over to departments? But I think the gentleman over there who is charged with that, maybe Vanderbilt affiliated, is that correct? But sort of nationally known from a grants perspective. Like, I think the grant that we have garnered for this is quite exceptional, and we want to make sure that we are operationalizing it appropriately so that we do not lose these funds that I think are very much needed from my perspective. So I appreciate you being engaged on that and carrying that through in your committee. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
No, that was the biggest thing that I think.
Apologize that
people may have questions about in the community, or people that participated in that process before may have questions about, and I would say there's a lot of more questions than answers right now about where we'll end up landing, and hopefully this national organization with this technical assistance piece will help kind of pull things back together and provide some needed direction, that can be implemented.
I appreciate that. Okay, now, Ms. Stiles, everybody has spoken at this point, so I'll acknowledge you briefly.
No, just wanted to share a little bit about what the committee's been doing. So we had another specially called meeting regarding Metro Arts, regarding transparency, how more of how we got here, how Metro Legal was involved, commissioner involvement, and also Metro Finance. If any of you are unfamiliar, there's a big mud pot brewing, so waiting to kind of find out how we're going to fund the artists that have been promised funding. The MHRC report came out last week, so those findings were delivered in the MHRC meeting last Monday, which did find some discrepancies in terms of how the voting was done, how equity was not implemented the way that it was supposed to, and so we have a July vote and an August vote. They're very different. There's a
Meaning the votes of the commission
Of the
or the grants
commissioners.
committee, not this
Correct.
body?
Not
Okay.
this body,
Thank
no.
you.
The votes are very different for the Arts Commission. The July vote was done with an equity lens, not race-based. And the August vote was done and it went back to traditional allocations to legacy organizations. So, there's been an oversight committee that's been created. They met this week.
Internal to the commission.
Internal to the commission, asked for by our director of finance. They were to meet, and then an outside entity from the commissioners called for a full commission meeting. And an HR report was presented in regards to a work complaint from Metro Arts Department employees on the director. So
a lot of
it's
things converging.
Lot of moving pieces. We're still waiting on the audit that has been called for by the director of finance.
And that's anticipated. We had an email from the mayor today, right, kind of pulling some of those things together. Did that address
No, it
the
did not.
timeframe on the audit?
Not really.
Ms. Darby, are you aware of when we expect the audit?
I've been advised that we should expect it by the end of the month, and I believe the mayor's letter did say the end of the month.
Okay, so end of the month. Got it.
There have been multiple statements about the audit, so I until I hear something from Director Crumbo, that's what I'm gonna go with, and I've heard some different timeframes on that, so.
From a committee standpoint, you have a holding place for another specially called,
At this point,
Pending.
we are moving forward with our legislation that has been filed for next week.
your legislation?
Yes.
Okay, so not your committee's legislation, just to be
Not a
clear.
committee.
This is
Yes, yes, there it
Committee
is.
chair
Yes,
report.
I filed
update.
legislation.
Okay.
Other people that are on the committee have signed on, but it's not a collective piece of legislation to do our part in this, because our goal is really to get the artists paid. So that's
Okay.
where we are, and we have other guests that we've had. So the library came and they've given an update in terms of their search
Yep.
for a new library director. They are having their board meeting at the end of this month, and it is on the agenda to discuss how they're going to proceed with the search for the new director. So it's not nebulous anymore.
I appreciate that. I think Ms. Gadd shared with me that April 7th to April 13th is National
Retreat and Library
Libraries Appreciation Week, so I think she'll have a resolution coming, and we'll be acknowledging some of our great folks that work for our library. So I appreciate you are the, for the public's edification, the public facilities,
Arts
and culture, formerly known as Parks and Libraries Committee Chair. So
Yes.
thank you for that report.
And Greenways is coming, so.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Chair Evans?
I just have a quick question related to one of the things kind of, MHRC, is under public health and safety. So on the, our amendment is being held up as like a kind of reason for some of the actions that have occurred. And so will we have an opportunity as part of the budget cycle to revisit like how amendments are drafted and essentially how we can avoid, I guess, being in the position that we are in this time, again, related to amendments in the budget?
Through the budget process, council members make amendments. This was originally in the mayor's budget, the $2 million, I'm assuming.
That's capital spending.
Okay, it was in the
It's capital.
original mayor's budget as administration, capital grants for cultural support, $2 million. It was discussed during the budget process of working committees and whatnot. The substitute budget amended that to say Arts Commission, capital funds for cultural support, $2 million. And then we had an amendment from a council member to change it from capital grants to funding for cultural support, $2 million. So that's the legislative language in the budget. The debate on the floor and the discussion on the floor is something separate than what is in the actual legislative document that appropriates funds.
And I understand, and I just think it's worth more offline or,
Yeah.
budget-related conversation about unintended consequences from the amendment language, and to your point, like what is included in the bill on the actual appropriation side. And I'm thinking back also to, this week you sent the USD GSD study, and that took 4 years,
Oh my gosh.
for us to get. And I think our intentions were really good. Yeah, like we're at the 4-year anniversary.
Like literally I asked Margaret in an email, it's like, okay, great, we finally got this. I'm like, dated April, received in
what it's
September.
like. Yeah.
Didn't we ask for this 3+ years ago,
Yeah,
right?
because it was Councilmember Mendez's budget.
And,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, and so I was just thinking, like, we don't know those things necessarily when we're like passionate about an issue. We're like, oh, let's do X, Y, and Z. What are some things that could make it really clear, I guess, about the intent, and that how we should maybe frame things differently, I suppose.
Maybe set criteria, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think,
it might be something that's good for conversations when we get into the budget cycle and
Right.
start, because we have a lot of meetings, pre-scheduled right now. A budget calendar will be going out to everybody at probably the beginning of April. And so, we'll have the opportunity to have those conversations. Just bear in mind that when we are creating, or the mayor's office creates the original budget document, we have a substitute that comes in. We don't get into the details in the budget ordinance about how funding is to be spent by the departments. So we see a budget book that details, here's how we intend to spend the funding, this is for salaries, this is for, these operational measures, but it doesn't even get down into the details that a department looks at for their funding. So we have a one-line item that says, finance department, this amount of money. So it kind of, it's, when we are talking about the language that goes into the budget and what the unintended consequences are, I mean, we as a council don't get down into the nitty-gritty on that. Does that?
I hear what you're saying, and I think also, when even thinking through, like, sexual assault center, we allocated $75,000 to them, making sure that we have a department where that funding is gonna flow through, like if there's other opportunities for nonprofits or whatever. Just stuff that I think that we didn't know necessarily last
and I
year.
think, again, to, executive committee and chairmanship, right? So if we are advancing amendments that we know will have kind of practical implementation considerations, right? Like I think for, you all as chairs of that committee, as you see kind of the amendments come through, which could be from any one of 40 members, right? But yourself in your capacity as chair of public health and safety might see random member, not necessarily on your committee, advancing something, right? Like kind of getting that institutional memory and knowledge and awareness with the context that you have. Like, okay, great idea. How would that be operationalized? Where does it need to go? What is the conversation we're going to have with the departments? And I think from a supportive standpoint to our budget chair, who's not here, so don't want to speak for her, but there is a lot put on the chair of budget, right? And all the departments and all the amendments. And so I think from a process standpoint, we should think about, from a supportive perspective, with Margaret, with budget chair, think about those things, right? And so that we get a little bit of vetting and also likewise accountability. And then I think that's too, chairs, what I'm, looking for in your kind of, end of service chairmanship report, right? Like, put we made this amendment to the budget, the legislative intent as articulated on the floor, like some of those things, like to kind of hold those through lines will be important. So I look forward to discussing that further with Chair Porterfield, and I think even for our next executive session, Margaret, or committee, we might want to be having that in front of budget and in deference to Chair Porterfield, what she thinks would be helpful from you all as chairs of committees relative to the budget process, right? We could maybe have some discussion on that at next executive committee. Chair Parker, were you seeking to respond to Chair Evans?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about that because I've been having a lot of conversations with folks about how that amendment worked, and then obviously the resultant, what actually happened with the funding. And what I think of examples in the past is like if, MNEA and SEIU and schools are all saying we need something, and we are able to make an appropriation or an adjustment to the budget to provide for that use, like, we're kind of trusting them to do what it is that we have sort of,
Made way for it to happen.
and the like, how do we know they're going to do it? Well, they're gonna be back asking for more money next year. So that's kind of how we know, and I feel like that's, I think, also important for entities that receive funding from Metro Council in our budget to sort of understand that like, that's, you talk about accountability, I mean, that is kind of the ultimate accountability, is
Right.
like, you'll be right back here next year. I don't know if we're allowed to enter into MOUs with departments or something. You probably don't want to do that.
Margaret nodding her head.
But fundamentally, when we go out on a limb and
Do the work and look.
get
and
something
find
to a
it,
department
yeah.
that they have asked for, it's, that's the expectation, is that they're going to use it for its intended purpose, and
Correct.
I hope that does happen in this case as well.
Well, and I think, this also kind of goes to process from a budget perspective. So, Chair Porterfield, this budget cycle, liaising with the chair of budget on the MNPS side, because I think we've all seen in this body, Chair Wiener, even back, our initial term together, is, it not kind of coming to us, right, sort of the aspirational budget stuff, and then it gets to us and we're sort of villains or heroes, right, to kind of have to come up with meeting this gap and responding to the intent of those folks who are here advocating and so forth. And so I do think kind of more work on the front end is helpful, but then also, to your point, from an accountability perspective, there is discussion in committee, there's articulating on the floor the legislative intent, and then the accountability mechanism is the next year. But, that's been kind of fits and starts in here and there, and we do it different all the time. So I think we do want to be intentional about how we advance these amendments and have some accountability around them, which your discussion elevates, and I appreciate you too, Chair Evans. Okay, with that, we have really, it is 6:30. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morrison, we appreciate it.
And whoever was not here needs